my name's Jen.
Hey folks, my name is Paul Harley.
Hi, my name is Jenny.
For our final project, Paul, Jenny and I have built an app called Carbon Low. Carbon Low is an app that helps people to lower their carbon footprint by sending them an alert when UK energy is particularly green. It's inspired by reactive energy, and indeed it's their data, it's their API that we use to grab that live energy data. The basic premise of our app is that every 30 minutes, we make a call to that reactive energy API and we find out what proportion of the UK's energy is being generated using low carbon sources, so whether that's wind or solar or hydropower, as opposed to fossil fuels. If the proportion of low carbon energy reaches a certain level, we send an alert to our users to say, hey, energy's really green at the moment, so now would be a good time to put on a wash in your washing machine or to turn your dehumidifier on, for example. We also have a dashboard which shows live data at any one time as to the UK's energy mix. Again, that's provided by the Reactive Energy API. So as part of this presentation, we're going to talk you through the front end. I'll hand over to Paul in a second. We'll also go through the back end of the project and how we've used Twilio's SMS service to integrate with our back end and send those SMS alerts. We'll also talk you through some of the agile methodologies that we've used to build this project, some of the challenges we faced, and also the things that we would like to add if we had more time or for future development.
Welcome to the front end part of the presentation. So as you can see on the moment on your screens, we've got the Carbon Low app webpage. It's essentially constructed with a simple navigation bar at the top, a footer with a bottom with some social media links, and the main sort of content in the middle of the page. This is a landing page. This graph here is demonstrating to user of this application the current makeup of the sources of energy in the national grid. So we can see when we hover over each different element within the graph, the various sort of energy sources. And obviously the percentage used on this donut demonstrates the bigger slice of the pie in terms of the contribution to the national grid. So you can see here for the fossil fuels, it's currently over 50%. This information is pulled from the Reactive Energy website. We've got a link there to sort of give a bit of a credit to these guys. We get the information from their API, and that gets updated every half an hour. So this gives a kind of an up-to-date breakdown of the energy mix. Going back to the nav bar, we've got the Carbon Low icon that takes us back home. We've got the About page, the Contact page with some animation there to indicate when we're hovering over each link. And we've got the Subscribe section, the Energy in My Pocket section, again with some animation. The About page, we're going to update this, provide some content about the application. The Contact page is a few bios for Jenny and myself, contact details. And then we've got the kind of subscribe section. So we sort of ask for an email and a phone number, and we can submit that by clicking on the button, and that then goes to the backend database, and then that facilitates a text message that gets sent to anybody who subscribes to our application, indicating when the best time is to start using the grid. Running through the application then, the front end has been written in React. The application, we've obviously imported all our components here, so we've got the footer, the sign up section, the contact section, the energy mix section, which we've already seen for the landing page, and the About Me. And then we've kind of used the React router past the user as they navigate through the website and click on the various links. Looking into sort of the components then, we've got like the logo section, which handles how the logo is presented. The nav bar and the look and feel. You can see that we've used styled components here as part of this to try and make sure we can get everything laid out in a nice, neat and orderly fashion. It's broken down into a left section, a middle section and a right section. We've constructed the nav bar in this fashion. That allows us to put the logo in, the actual navigation links, and then the registration area. Then we've got the nav links. We have the mobile nav links. So these are the responsive element of the website. When we sort of go to our home page and reduce the size, maybe from a mobile device, you can see that the content is fairly responsive. We also sort of drop the menu here at the top to a burger menu. Also got some nice little animation there from a burger to an X, and that's kind of done using the Frame and Motion package that we've imported in. Then we've got the About page, we've got our Contact page. Again, this is fairly sort of simple style components and HTML, importing a number of the images from our assets file. We've got the footer section again, using style components. We use something called Fort Awesome to bring in the icons for Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube. And then we have the sort of the energy mix. So that's kind of the main page. So here you can see that we're again using the React, and we're importing something called React Chart.js. Again, it's another module that allows us to sort of present a graph and use this donut representation. In this area of the code, you can see that we are using state as part of React. We're using Axios to make the HTTP request to the actual API from the reactive energy. In this section, we're kind of manipulating the data. So we obviously get a response from that API. It gives us back a number of objects and arrays, and we go through the process of flattening those arrays and getting that information out, putting that into an array, essentially two arrays. One, the type data, which sort of indicates the various different sources of energy, and one that sort of details with the actual split. So the type data will contain the biomass, nuclear, wind, solar, and the proportion data will contain the percentage split. Those pieces of information are then set into the state using the set chart data function, using the labels here, type data, and the proportion data is also put in there. We sort of set the colours for each of the segments within the donut. And then we sort of come into the rendering, and then this renders the actual picture of the donut onto the page with the various HTML elements so it's rendered correctly. And that's kind of it, guys.
In terms of the back end that we built for Carbon Low, we decided to stick with Node.js, Express and Sequelize, tried and tested methods for building a back end. We knew what we were doing with those, and we also realised that they would integrate really well, really easily with the third-party service that we had investigated and chosen to send our SMS alerts, a service called Twilio. I'd like to show you a little bit of the back end code. Before I do that, I want to show you the sign-up page on our front end. This is the page where users will enter their email and their phone number when they decide to sign up to our service. That then registers them in our database to receive text messages. So turning to the back-end code, I won't show you all of it, but I'd like to pick out a couple of interesting bits, which I think you'll enjoy seeing. First of all, in this file that I've got open here, which is the main body of our app, you can see we've got our routes defined. But on top of that, we have this piece of code here. So this is really the crux of our app. This is what enables the app to schedule every 30 minutes a call to that reactive energy API to grab that live energy data and then decide whether or not to send an SMS alert or to wait until the threshold is higher. So to do that, we've used an NPM package called nodecron, which does exactly that. It allows you to schedule jobs that happen every 30 minutes in our case. So you'll see there that we've got a function that's being called. So we've written that function. I'll just show you some highlights of it in this file. Everything's modularized in this backend repository. So we have functions and functionality stored in different files, and they're called in using require statements. This bit of code here is where the business happens. It's where the logic happens. When that 30 minutes comes around and when the function is called, we first of all check what time it is. So we don't want alerts being sent to users in the middle of the night. So we first of all have a check to see whether it's between 7 in the morning or 8 in the evening. We use JavaScript's built-in date function to work out that time. If it is during the daytime, we make that call using Axios to the reactive energy API. Then we grab the data that comes back from that. We do some data manipulation. So we grab all the different low carbon energy sources and add them together, work out what the proportion is. If the current energy proportion is above a certain threshold, and at the moment we've set it at 45%, then our app will go to our database. It will grab all of the users that have subscribed. Then it will send a message to those users. Before it sends it, it will also check when the last SMS was sent. That's because we don't want the user getting a message every half an hour, say, throughout the day. So we've chosen to limit it to once a day or once every 10 hours. And we do that by storing a timestamp basically in the database when an SMS is sent. So assuming that all of the logic has been satisfied and that the energy level is above a certain threshold, they haven't been messaged in the last 10 hours, and it's not the middle of the night, that's when we call Twilio's code. So Twilio has excellent documentation. We were able to read through it, make sense of it, try out a couple of tutorials, and then integrate it with our existing backend that we had already put together. So if we have a look at the message sender code, here we are. This is code provided to us by Twilio. What it does is it goes to our database, grabs our users from the database, and for each of those users who is subscribed, it invokes Twilio's built-in function to send an SMS message. And we've configured that message to say what we want it to say. You can see from the top that we do that by requiring in Twilio as an npm package. That's how it works, so no surprises there. And we also use .m file to store all of our variables, so our unique Twilio API keys and that sort of thing. One final thing to tell you about the backend is that we use a MySQL database. We've got a very basic model set up here. We've got fields for email, phone number. The subscribe field is a Boolean. It's a true or false to say whether or not the user is subscribed. This allows them to unsubscribe in future. We also, as I mentioned before, put a timestamp in the database. That's the message sent field, so that we can then refer back to that, check when the message was sent, and see whether or not it's time to send another one. So in a nutshell, that's it. That's the database. As we were building it, we used test-driven development to write some tests using Jest as we went along. So you can see by very briefly looking at these tests that we create some dummy users with dummy phone numbers in the database and check our functionality as we went along. We also used Postman to test as we went along too, as well as just good old-fashioned sending ourselves text messages using the Twilio SMS service. Okay, I'll hand over to Jenny. Thanks.
There are a couple of different practices that we used during the build of our project. I have inserted a little clip here of our Monday board that we used. I'm quite familiar with this software from a project management point of view, and I decided to use this because I thought the view was really helpful. So you can see there that we've got the priority, the status, and we sectioned it off with titles for when we would meet. The color coding works really well. I think you can see the priorities are red or purple, depending on that, and there's some other colours as well. This really helped with our workflow and accountability and making sure that we didn't duplicate work. It's really easy to use. You can add people to your workspace, and it meant that we were aware when things were kind of running behind schedule or in front of schedule. We also had a section for any bugs that we needed to look at or questions that we had for each other. We did regular stand-ups. We managed to meet about twice a week during this, and we were obviously quite in the habit of doing stand-ups. It was a good time to review with each other, check in how we were all doing, whether or not anybody wanted to swap what they were doing, and check that we were all on the same page. We also met as a three to do a bit of mob programming. Again, really good because we split out into doing back-end and front-end. This meant that we were all aware of where our code was up to and what we were looking at. We also did pair programming, where we might have researched one of the packages that we were going to use, and then one person would read the documentation beforehand and then navigate the driver. That was fantastic. And as most people here know, I'm a massive Pomodoro fan, so I've inserted that there as well, so that we used that to kind of keep focus when we were doing longer pair programming sessions, and that really helped us keep on track. We encountered several challenges during our build of Carbon Low, the first of which was actually clarifying our MVP. So we were all quite enthusiastic and had big ideas about how it was going to look and interact with our users. And we actually had to scale down quite a bit and insert that more into our future features ideas, because the first idea that we came up with was probably too big to deliver in the time. Secondly, we had to integrate the new packages that we used. So we obviously used Twilio for our SMS feature, and then we needed to work out how to time that appropriately. So we have to use something called node cron. We needed to work out the best way to integrate that with our backend code. So that took a little bit of testing and figuring out, moving things around, refactoring, but we overcame that one. Thirdly, we used Twilio, as I've mentioned. The base code for Twilio is actually built to be used with MongoDB. So because we were building in SQL with SQLize, we needed to change that over rather than using the Mongoose language. That took a little while, but that was okay. We managed to do it and it works just fine. We had originally wanted to have a login feature with password encryption, but unfortunately it just took too long to try and figure it out. We wouldn't have been able to test it appropriately. We didn't want people's details to be available without the password encryption, so we didn't have time to do that. Unfortunately, that feature had to be shelved. And then lastly, our last big challenge was with the deployment of the backend. So we have deployed it in Heroku, which is pretty easy to use. However, Heroku goes to sleep if you don't interact with your app for a certain number of hours. And because we need to collect the data from the API regularly so that we can send the text messages and work out the timing for that, that stopped our app from working. And we needed to find a workaround for that, and we actually only realised that once we had deployed it and we're kind of testing it among ourselves. So we found a third-party package, which I believe is another cron package, and that's how we managed to work that one out.
In terms of future features that we'd like to add to the Carbon Low app to improve it in the future, the first of those would be an unsubscribe feature. So it could work in a couple of ways. Users could reply directly to the text message, texting unsubscribe, for example, and that would remove them from the database or toggle that switch to false under the subscribed field. Or they could also log into a members area of the website and unsubscribe that way in their personal account. The other thing we'd love to do is have a log of the historic energy data so that people could go on and see what the past energy proportions were via the front end of the app.
In terms of future development, we actually had quite a lot of ideas, but we've slimmed them down here for this slide. And one of those is obviously have our login function, which would lead you to a members area where you would see the readouts from the proportion. And we also thought that it would be quite amazing to have maybe forums attached to this where people could share tips, ideas for reducing their carbon footprint and live a more sustainable life in that way. We would hope to add that in with the password encryption, of course, and then that would also have the option to add family members maybe, or devices like that. As you can see, I've cropped out a little bit from my own reactive energy portal here, which was our inspiration for this project, and we would love to do something similar like this with Carbon Low to show how much carbon dioxide has been saved. I think these comparisons are really helpful because it helps to contextualise the small actions that you're taking to help reduce your carbon footprint.
And that concludes our presentation. Thanks very much for listening.